10-year-old black girl hacks billionaire's Shelby emerald ring. Exposes his secret auto conspiracy. She crouched beneath the gleaming hood of a '68 Shelby GT500, tiny hands tracing wiring no one else dared touch. Across the chassis, Orion Chase, billionaire real estate titan, glared down at her, disbelief etched in every line of his custom suit. "A child?" he snarled, voice dripping with contempt. But when the engine roared to life at her command, his world shattered. In that heartbeat, he realized he'd bet his entire empire on her failure and lost. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping showdown, hit subscribe and smash that like button, because you're about to watch a 10-year-old black prodigy outmaneuver a billionaire and expose a corporate cover-up. Stay tuned. Share this video with everyone who's ever been underestimated, and buckle up. What happens next will change everything you thought you knew. Amina Bello hopped off the school bus and crossed the cracked pavement toward her aunt and uncle's backyard workshop, her backpack bumping against the welder's mask strapped to her side. At 10 years old, she already spoke the language of engines better than most adults spoke English. Every click, hum, and hiss translated in her mind like a secret code. Since her parents' accident 2 years ago, Amina had lived with Aunt Khadija and Uncle Omar just outside Atlanta, where the smell of oil and overheated metal was as comforting as a mother's embrace. That afternoon, as she was tightening the bolts on a beat-up lawnmower, she noticed the sleek silhouette of a red 1968 Shelby GT500 idling by the workshop gate. Its hood lay open like a wounded giant. A sharply dressed man in an expensive gray suit circled it, clutching his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I don't care how much you charge for the tow," he barked. "I have a board meeting in 2 hours. The governor isn't going to wait for me." Amina paused, her wrench balanced in midair. Aunt Khadijah's warning echoed in her mind. Never talk to strangers. But there was something in the man's desperation, a raw, impatient energy that tugged at her sense of fairness. She slipped her toolkit from her backpack, wiped her hands on her jeans, and approached the car. "Excuse me, sir," she said, voice calm but firm. The man whirled around, his tailored tie swinging. His eyes narrowed at the sight of her faded denim shorts, an oversized racing shirt Uncle Omar had given her, and braids dusted with engine grime. "This is a high-performance vehicle," he said, tone laced with condescension. "I'm dealing with professionals here." Amina crouched beside the radiator hose. "My uncle runs a garage and he's taught me everything he could. I can take a look." He sighed, glancing at his gold watch. With nothing to lose, he opened the hood wider. 40 minutes ago, it overheated and died. I smelled something sweet like syrup. Amina's brow furrowed. "Coolant leak," she said, pointing to a thin puddle beneath the car. "That's why it overheated." Impressed, despite himself, the man extended a hand. "Name's Orion Chase, Chase Enterprises." "Mina Bello," she replied. She unzipped her tool case and worked with swift precision, wrapping a temporary seal around the hose crack and topping off the radiator. "That'll hold until you reach town, but top up the fluid as you go." As she brushed soot from her fingers, Orion's gaze dropped to her left hand and froze. An emerald green ring sat on her finger, wrapped with thread to keep it from slipping. The light caught a tiny crescent imperfection he recognized all too well. His voice caught. "Where did you get that ring?" Amina's smile faltered. "It was my mother's," she said softly. "She said one day I'd understand why it was important." Orion's heart pounded. 12 years ago, he had given a little girl in a place called Little Haven Orphanage an identical ring, a promise he never kept. The memory slammed into him like a piston blow. He glanced at the cooling Shelby, at the little mechanic who'd fixed it in minutes. The world he'd built on steel and glass suddenly felt hollow. "I'd like to drive you home," he said, voice trembling. "As a thank you." Amina hesitated only a moment before climbing into his passenger seat. As they pulled away from the workshop, Orion asked casual questions. Her school, her family, how long she'd lived here. Each answer dug up memories he'd buried: the orphanage, closing his father's sudden land deal, the disappearance of so many children. When they reached her modest home, Orion handed her a business card. "If you ever need anything at all, call me." She took it with a curious look. He watched her run up the driveway, her braided hair bouncing, the ring glinting in the late afternoon sun. In his chest, he felt the first crack of a reckoning he could no longer ignore. Because this chance encounter had just lit the fuse on secrets buried for a decade, secrets that would bind their lives together in ways neither of them could imagine. From the moment Orion Chase dismissed her as just a kid, the tension in the workshop became electric. He circled the Mustang like a shark, tapping his gold watch and sneering. "You know this is one of the world's most coveted muscle cars. My engineers have poured weeks into it. You really think you can fix what they couldn't?" Amina's heart pounded, but she met his gaze without flinching. Around her, the three mechanics he'd brought, veterans in crisp uniforms, exchanged uneasy glances. Each man bore the confidence of training and certification, yet they all stood silent as she crouched beside the engine. Orion's contempt ricocheted off the concrete walls, amplified by their stares, a 10-year-old black girl, an oversized t-shirt stained with oil, daring to challenge their expertise. She opened her compact toolkit with deliberate calm, pulling out a digital tire pressure gauge, a mini infrared thermometer, and a set of precision screwdrivers. "Let's start with the basics," she said, voice steady. "Temperature differential will tell us if the coolant passages are blocked." The mechanics snickered under their breath. Orion leaned in, voice low but venomous. "Watch closely, boys. She's going to show us how a child tinkers." Ignoring their mockery, Amina pressed the infrared thermometer to the engine block. Numbers blinked on its tiny screen. "See this. The cylinder head on the driver's side is 60 degrees hotter than the passenger side. That points to a damaged coolant rail or a collapsed hose." She reached deep into the engine bay and traced a crimped section of braided hose hidden beneath a heat shield. The lead technician, Marcus, scoffed. "We already replaced that hose twice. It can't be that." Sometimes, Amina replied, "It isn't obvious. Let me remove the shield." As she worked, her mind flashed back to countless evenings in Uncle Omar's dimly lit garage hours spent studying automotive schematics, pausing YouTube tutorials on ECU firmware, translating technical manuals on her phone. Every step she took now was part of a mental map she'd built over 2 years. With the heat shield off the hose, crimp revealed a hairline fracture. She held up the broken piece. This tiny fissure leaked coolant until the system overheated and triggered the limp mode. Orion's smirk wavered. "Fine, but that's elementary retrofitting. What about the non-responsive ignition?" Amina's eyes brightened. "I noticed the ECU module. It's a newer model with an encrypted failsafe. If coolant pressure drops below 50 psi, it locks the injectors until it receives a reset signal from the manufacturer's server." She pointed to a small black box bolted to the fender. "That's the kill switch. No one's checked it because it's buried under the aftermarket intake." The head technician, Marcus, pushed past her. "We would have caught that." Amina calmly handed him a mirror on an extendable rod. "Go ahead." He shrugged, lowered the mirror tip, and peered in, his eyes widening as he spotted the module. Orion's pallor deepened. "What do you propose? I need access to the workshop network and a laptop with internet," she said. "I'll download the patch to reset the ECU signature, bypass the digital handshake, and restore the injectors." Orion snapped his fingers. "My IT guy is setting it up now." He turned to the stunned mechanics. "Looks like she's earned the benefit of the doubt." Amina moved to the diagnostic station. As the network drive mounted, she paused. Around her, she could feel the collective skepticism, but also the faint flicker of curiosity. Tony, the most senior mechanic, muttered to a colleague, "If she can actually do this, I'll eat my wrench." With practiced hands, Amina navigated the manufacturer's secure portal, entered her uncle's workshop credentials, and downloaded the firmware reset utility. A progress bar crawled across the screen as Orion paced behind her phone in hand, ready to record any triumph or mockery. Moments later, she connected the laptop to the OBD2 port. Lines of code streamed by, interspersed with encrypted identifiers. She executed a custom script she'd written, carefully crafted to bypass the signature check without flashing unauthorized firmware. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, each keystroke precise, each command informed by the midnight sessions she'd spent reverse engineering similar ECUs. On the overhead monitor, status messages flipped from locked to handshake pending to reset complete. A chorus of clicks and hums rose from the engine as the ECU rebooted. Then, in one confident motion, she turned the ignition key. The Mustang's engine thundered to life, roaring through the workshop like a storm unleashed. Mechanics jumped back, astonished. Tony staggered forward, tears in his eyes. Marcus stared at the speakers, slack-jawed. And Orion froze, face ashen, realizing his empire of expertise had just been unraveled by a 10-year-old. A stunned silence fell. Then Orion cleared his throat. You've done it." His voice cracked pride and humiliation entwined. Amina slid from under the hood, dusting off her hands. She looked directly at Orion. "You wanted proof I could do what your engineers couldn't. Now you have it." In that charged stillness, she sensed the shift not just in Orion's perception, but in the entire room. The workshop's kings of torque and torque converters would never look at her the same way again. And neither would Orion chase billionaire extraordinaire, who had just discovered that true expertise doesn't come with a title or a paycheck, but with curiosity, courage, and the willingness to be underestimated. Amina stepped back from the roaring Mustang and raised her voice so every mechanic could hear. "Here's how we turn the tables," she said, calm and commanding. "First, I need full access to your network, every ECU firmware dump from the last 6 months, every diagnostic log from partner garages. We're going to map out this pattern of failures." The room went silent as Orion hesitated, then nodded curtly. She moved to the shop computer, logging in with credentials she'd memorized during late-night practice sessions in her uncle's office. As the file list populated, she explained, "These aren't random breakdowns. They're deliberate lockouts programmed at the factory. Once a car hits 90 days after its first start, the ECU goes into permanent limp mode unless it receives a reset from a proprietary server." She clicked through rows of data, hundreds of VINs, timestamps, locations. "See this cluster of Shelby GT500's 14 identical failures, always at the same mileage threshold." Orion's face paled. His prized network of high-end restorations was built on secrecy, never admitting fault, always billing the customer for parts and labor. Now, Amina was exposing how every one of those unfixable Mustangs had been sabotaged. She pulled up another window showing internal invoices and buyback contracts. "Here," she said, highlighting a column of transactions. "Each total loss unit was sold back to the manufacturer at a fraction of its market value. Your network of garages pockets a cut on every returned car." Gasps swelled in the bay. Tony, the veteran mechanic, shook his head. "My entire career I thought we were doing honest work." Amina didn't pause for sympathy. "Next, I'll prepare a patch to override the digital handshake lock. But we can't just fix one car, we need proof." She opened her backpack, removed a compact router she'd modified, and connected it to the shop's LAN. "This router will mirror all network traffic to my laptop and to a public server. I want every line of code, every email, every hidden file to be archived in real time." Orion's hands trembled. "You can't do that." She met his gaze. "Watch me." On her screen, packets of encrypted data began to flow across a live dashboard. She launched a script that decrypted proprietary comms emails between Chase Enterprises executives and repair shop managers detailing how to declare cars irreparable. As each message appeared, the mechanics edged closer. Marcus, the head tech, wiped sweat from his brow. "All those nights we stayed late, we were chasing ghost errors." Amina tapped another key. "Now we make this public." She configured the live stream, a split screen showing her commands on one side and the Mustang's engine bay on the other. "Every viewer will see this corruption in action." She hit broadcast. Within seconds, viewers began flooding in comments, scrolling faster than anyone could read. "This is fraud. Call the feds. I was charged $5,000 for a total loss." Unfazed, Amina shifted back to the ECU. Time for the patch. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she executed a custom firmware override, a payload she'd crafted after reverse engineering dozens of stolen dumps. The progress bar crept forward 10%, 50%, 90%, until at last the screen flashed success. She turned the ignition key and the Shelby thundered to life, its engine singing with the unleashed power its designers had meant all along. The bay erupted. Mechanics cheered, some hugging others, weeping with relief. Orion covered his mouth, staring in disbelief. Amina stepped forward, voice firm. "You gambled on our ignorance. Mr. Chase bet you'd win by underestimating a 10-year-old black girl. But the real mistake was thinking you could hide behind your suits and secret servers." Behind her, the live viewer count climbed into the tens of thousands. Comments demanded investigations, class action suits, criminal charges. She turned to Orion again. "I've sent all this data, firmware dumps, email threads, purchase orders to federal regulators and consumer protection agencies. You have exactly 2 choices: come clean now or face every legal, financial, and reputational consequence of this conspiracy." Orion sank into a chair, hands on his head. The mechanics gathered around Amina, their faces alight with admiration. Tony patted her shoulder and murmured, "You've just changed the entire industry." As sirens wailed in the distance, responding to the regulator's tip-off, Amina closed her laptop. She looked out at the stunned crowd. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about accountability and building something better. She smiled, small but triumphant. "Now let's make sure this never happens again." In that charged moment, the workshop, once a playground of secret sabotage, became a catalyst for transparency. And at its center stood a 10-year-old girl whose fierce intelligence and unwavering courage had ignited a reckoning no amount of money or power could withstand. Amina's fingers flew over the keyboard as she initiated the final phase of her plan. First, she plugged her modified router into the shop's LAN, routing every packet of data to her laptop and a live stream server. The other mechanics exchanged uneasy glances as lines of encrypted diagnostic logs scrolled across her screen. "These aren't isolated incidents," she said, voice low but unwavering. "They're a pattern of deliberate sabotage." With a few keystrokes, she decrypted proprietary firmware dumps from 14 identical Mustangs. "See here," she pointed. "Every car's ECU locks into limp mode 90 days after first ignition, just enough time to maximize repair bills." Marcus, the head technician, paled. "All this time, we thought it was wear and tear." Amina switched windows to display internal invoices and repurchase contracts. Each total loss vehicle was sold back to the manufacturer at a fraction of market value. "Your network of shops keeps a cut on everyone." Her cursor hovered over a column labeled Commission 15%. The room went silent. Orion Chase, his custom suit suddenly feeling threadbare, cleared his throat. "What do you want?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "Full accountability, but first we expose you." With a decisive click, she started the broadcast. On screens mounted above the bays, and on dozens of streaming platforms, viewers watched as Amina's screen split into 2 feeds, her live terminal commands on one side and the Mustang's engine bay on the other. Comments erupted. "Fraud! Call the feds! Class action now!" Behind her, the mechanics leaned in tears and shock mixing on their faces. Amina opened her toolbox this time to reveal a USB drive and a spare OBD2 cable. Now for the reset. She connected the cable to the car's diagnostic port and loaded her custom firmware patch. Her script bypassed the digital handshake guard, rewriting the kill switch routine in memory. The progress bar inched forward 25%, 50%, 75%, until it blinked success. A hush fell. Then Amina turned the ignition key. The Shelby's engine roared to life, smooth and unchoked, like a beast released from chains. Mechanics gasped. Tony staggered backward, tears in his eyes. Orion sank into a folding chair, hands pressed to his temples. Unfazed, Amina tapped one last command to send the entire data archive directly to federal regulators and consumer protection agencies. "Your choice now," she announced. "Own up to this scheme or face every legal, financial, and reputational consequence." Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance, the regulator's enforcement team en route. Orion's phone vibrated with incoming alerts, SEC inquiries, media notifications, stock sell-off warnings. He looked up at Amina, speechless. Turning to the gathered crew, she said quietly, "This isn't personal revenge. It's justice holding people accountable and preventing future abuse." The mechanics erupted into cheers, some weeping with relief. Orion, defeated, slid his suit jacket off, revealing the toll of arrogance stripped bare. As police cars pulled into the bay and agents moved in with warrants, Amina closed her laptop and looked out at the stunned crowd. "Let this be a lesson," she said softly. "Underestimate by skin color, age, or background, and you leave yourself wide open. True power belongs to those who use their knowledge with integrity." In that moment, the workshop, once a vault of hidden failures, became a beacon of transparency and accountability. And at its center stood a 10-year-old girl whose quiet brilliance had ignited a reckoning no amount of wealth or influence could contain. The instant the enforcement agents snapped handcuffs onto Orion Chase's wrists, the air in the garage exploded with cheers. Wrenches slammed against tool benches in a victorious rhythm, and mechanics who'd once worked in silence now embraced one another's eyes, shining with relief and righteous triumph. Sam, Amina's uncle, dropped to his knees, clutching his granddaughter's hand as tears streamed down his cheeks. For years they'd been blamed for inexplicable failures. Now their integrity was vindicated in the loudest possible way. Within hours, news crews crowded the driveway. Chirons splashed across every network. Child prodigy exposes billionaire fraud and Mustang mechanic versus corporate cover-up. Clips of Amina's live stream, her calm voice narrating hidden code. The moment the engine thundered back to life, racked up millions of views. Social media hashtags trended nationwide. Fixing justice. Amina, the mechanic. Expose the corruption. Ordinary drivers flooded consumer protection hotlines with stories of overcharged lemon buybacks. By the next morning, regulators had opened formal investigations into Chase Enterprises. Stock tickers flashed red as investors dumped shares, and government officials cited Amina's data dump as the tipping point. Orion's CEO title was suspended pending a full audit. He faced class action lawsuits, SEC inquiries, and possible criminal charges for conspiracy and wire fraud. Meanwhile, Amina received offers from top automotive innovators. Lucid Motors pledged a $1.2 million research grant for her real-time diagnostics platform. Rivian invited her to develop advanced firmware safety features, yet she respectfully declined until Bello and Daughter Garage, rechristened in her honor, was fully rebuilt, complete with a youth apprenticeship program. Back in the refurbished workshop, new diagnostic bays gleamed under bright lights as teens from the neighborhood learned alongside Sam, Tony, and Maria. Amina, modest but radiant, guided them through coding sessions and engine teardowns. Her emerald ring glittered on her finger, no longer just a family heirloom, but a symbol of accountability, innovation, and the transformative power of refusing to be underestimated. In the aftermath of this extraordinary reckoning, there are 4 core takeaways. First, never confuse power with competence. Orion Chase wielded wealth, influence, and polished titles, but it was a 10-year-old black girl's curiosity and technical mastery that exposed the entire scam. True expertise doesn't come stamped on a business card. It's earned through relentless problem-solving, fearless questioning, and the humility to admit you might be wrong. Second, transparency is the ultimate safeguard. Modern vehicles and modern corporations run on code as much as metal. When backdoor kill switches and secret buyback schemes go unexamined, they quietly prey on both skilled technicians and everyday consumers. Amina's live data dump didn't just fix a Mustang. It tore down a wall of secrecy, proving that sunlight is the most powerful disinfectant. Third, prejudice is a self-inflicted wound. By dismissing a child, and specifically a black child, as incompetent, Chase left himself vulnerable to the very ingenuity he'd underestimated. Whenever you write someone off based on age, skin color, or background, you not only perpetuate injustice, you blind yourself to the immense talent hiding in plain sight. Finally, the highest form of revenge is reconstruction. Amina didn't merely destroy a corrupt system. She built something better in its place, redeemed a community garage, launched an apprenticeship program, and inspired automotive innovators to prioritize ethics over profit. In her hands, a family heirloom ring became a symbol not of inheritance, but of responsibility. If there's one lasting lesson, it's this: the fiercest power belongs not to those who control money or machinery, but to those who harness knowledge with integrity and use it to uplift others. Underestimate the quiet ones at your peril, because they often hold the greatest capacity for change. And that's how a 10-year-old black mechanic didn't just fix a billionaire's prized Mustang, she exposed a web of corporate deceit and transformed an entire industry. Amina Bello proved that curiosity, courage, and integrity can shatter the strongest walls of privilege. If this story inspired you, hit like and share it with anyone who's ever been written off. Drop a comment below. When have you surprised someone who underestimated you? Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next video, where we'll reveal how an 11-year-old coder infiltrated a Fortune 500 network, and what she discovered will leave you speechless. Stay curious, stay fearless, and remember, the greatest power belongs to those who refuse to be silenced. I'll see you in the next one.